Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is our weekend edition. Would love to give you a chance to join our conversation today. That one is number 1-800-351-1212. In studio with me is Kelly Shackelford, and in just a minute we're going to introduce a couple of others. But Kelly Shackelford, you and I haven't seen each other too much, but I know we're going to be talking about a lot of the religious liberty cases, aren't we?
Yeah, there's plenty to go on there, and plenty to go on some other things going on, I think, too. Something about the speaker and maybe Benghazi and, I don't know, a bunch of other things, too.
That's right. Matter of fact, we posted some articles on the Benghazi hearings. We have some things about where Paul Ryan stands on the issues, the speaker issue, environmental priorities as well, climate change and all the rest. So certainly that is the case. Anybody listening to Point of View knows that years ago, you and I did a phone interview with Paul Diamond. And then if they've been paying attention, we've had him in studio a number of times. And he is a barrister in England. And you were the first one to kind of get our attention. And Paul Diamond, it is always great to have you in studio with us today.
Well, it's always great to be in Texas. I just want to know when you're going to get independence.
He also wants to know why it's raining. For those of you in the other parts of the United States, it's raining here just like it's London. You know, at least last time I was in London, it looked just like it is today.
It's colder.
And a little bit cooler, but we'll certainly survive. But Kelly, before we get into all the other issues that we're going to talk about, I did want to talk about one that we surfaced last week. And one of your colleagues was here, Jeremy Dice, and he was talking about Coach Joe Kennedy and the individual who actually was convinced that maybe going to the 50-yard line after the football game to pray would be very important. And he, I think, picked that up, first of all, watching Facing the Giants.
Right.
And then later, now this new movie out, Woodlawn, both of them have this idea. And, of course, we've seen this in other places. No problem with that until up there in Bremerton, Washington, they said, nope, you can't do that anymore. So a lot of people last week heard about whether or not he would go. We knew he would. What's happened since then?
It's really an incredible story. You talked about the two movies, and I mean, I think this could be a movie, what's already happened, and just the God's providence, right? Last Friday, I wasn't here on Point of View because I was giving a speech across the country. And guess who spoke right before me? The producer of Woodlawn.
Oh, how about that?
And so
the Irwin brothers, yeah. We love them.
Right when this was about to occur, we had never met. God had us in the same place, and so he actually very quickly did a video to support Coach Joe Kennedy. It went on all the people who were on their list to see the movie is like over 1 million people, and they shouted out to support Coach Joe Kennedy. And so everybody was watching. I mean, the media was there last Friday, national media, local media, reporters, everybody else. Is he going to go to the 50-yard line because he could be fired, right? And so after the game, what happened is, and they lost, but nobody seemed to care about who won or lost the game, right? Yes. After the game, this is just the type of guy he is. He actually served in the military, so that's good to know. Yeah, in the Marines, yeah. But he's just a really good guy who loves these kids. And so, typical to him, he decided that when his team turned to do the fight song, that he would go by himself because he didn't want to get them in any trouble.
Yeah.
So he goes down to a knee to pray, and he feels something, but he doesn't know what it is. And when he opens his eyes, the entire other team and their coach are praying with him.
Yes.
And then when they stand up, they're hugging him, they're thanking him. I mean, how often do you see something like that? And then he goes around the corner to the press conference, which is waiting for him. And Hiram, I know our barrister friend here, Paul Diamond, knows Hiram, and Hiram is walking with him. Well, he looks, and in front of him is a guy. Coach Joe Kennedy was, when he was a young man, was troubled, and he went from boys' home to boys' home and place to place until this one guy that had patience with him led him to the Lord and changed his life. That guy was there.
Oh.
He had driven 6 hours to be there to support him because he knew what was going on. And at that moment, Coach Kennedy the tears just flooded. And this is right as he's walking up to the press conference. So it was a pretty powerful night. And, I wish I could say that the district has come out and said, hey, we're not going to do anything. We're backing off this. But they have said nothing either way. And so we're ready to take action if we have to, and we're hopeful that we won't. But they certainly hadn't, made it easier for him. But he's just going to keep doing what he made a pledge to the Lord to do, which is after every game to go and thank the Lord for the ability that he has to coach these kids, and he thanks the Lord for these kids. And I can say it any better than in the Seattle newspaper, you had an atheist write an editorial who said, you know what, if my kid had a coach, this is the coach I'd want my kid to have. And so I think the witness and the example that he is setting forth is impacting people all over the country.
Well, and one of the things that you've talked about before, and you've actually written a little booklet on this, is the Tinker case, which, as far as I can remember, Tinker versus Des Moines says you don't leave your religious rights at the schoolhouse gate, and you certainly don't leave them there on the football field, right?
That's exactly right. And I would say, and I know you have a link at pointofview.net, but if people are listening to this and they have not done anything to support the coach, there is a way to do that. They can go to Liberty Institute's website and around the front and click on it, but it'll take it to a page on his case and everything. And the first thing allows people to send a letter of support. They can just click on it, do their name, and then there's also even a Facebook page called Support Coach Kennedy, yes, I think is what it's called. And they can, and there are thousands of people signing up. And I mean, he sees that, and so sometimes you feel kind of alone in these situations. So I would just love the whole country to do exactly what that other team on the other side did, and that is sort of surround him, put their arms around him, and say, we're proud of what you're doing.
Let me just give you a couple action items. We certainly do have activists, and the one that we gave last week, but some of you maybe didn't have a chance to hear that when we had Jeremy Dice in studio, is to go to libertyinstitute.org, and there's a place where you can, it's on the right-hand corner, click on that and send a note of encouragement to the coach, Joe Kennedy. The other one that we suggested last week, and I know you won't talk about it, but I will, that is your book called Supreme Irony, the piece that you presented before the Historical Society of the Supreme Court. If I remember right, Samuel Alito said it was the best presentation he'd ever heard there. So again, I'll say that, you might not, but again, that's something that you can obtain as well from Liberty Institute. And that just goes back to this old Tinker versus Des Moines case. And the irony is the ACLU thought they were going to be using this to help those individuals that were protesting the Vietnam War. They never saw that you would today be using this to stand up for the rights of religious liberty.
Yeah, that's the way it works. If you have free speech, that means you can share the gospel. And, I'm sure that's a frightening thought to the ACLU, but I really believe that God is using Coach Kennedy to send a message to every Christian across the country, just their willingness to stand up. This is not a fun thing to be where he is, maybe risking your job and everything. But he made a commitment, he's following through, and the Lord is really walking with him, and I think that's what all of us want to be able to do.
When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more with Paul Diamond in studio with us. Some of the cases that he has been fighting there in the UK, really giving us an understanding of how important this religious liberty issue is, whether it's in the U.S. or the UK. So we'll come back and talk with him. A little bit later, Debbie Georgatos will be joining us, and we'll be talking about the speaker's race in Benghazi. We've got a lot to cover right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
With all the congressional spending, there have been some emails circulating with common sense sayings written by wise people long ago. One of those is the 10 you cannots. If you've not seen them, here they are. Number 1, you cannot bring about prosperity by discouraging thrift. Number 2, you cannot strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. Number 3, you cannot help the poor man by destroying the rich. Number 4, you cannot further the brotherhood of man by inciting class hatred. Number 5, you cannot build character and courage by taking away man's initiative and independence. Number 6, you cannot help small men by tearing down big men. Number 7, you cannot lift the wage earner by pulling down the wage payer. Number 8, you cannot keep out of trouble by spending more than your income. Number 9, you cannot establish security on borrowed money. And number 10, you cannot help men permanently by doing for them what they will not do for themselves. Over the years, these have been incorrectly attributed to Abraham Lincoln. Actually, they were written in 1916 by Reverend William Bottker, a Presbyterian clergyman and pamphlet writer. The confusion stemmed from a pamphlet published in 1942 entitled Lincoln on Limitations. The pamphlet had a Lincoln quote on one side and these statements by the pastor on the other side. You know, there is wisdom in these 10 you cannots. Unfortunately, we live in a world today that really believes that we can help one part of society by harming another part of society. We need to listen to this wise pastor before we enact more legislation that attempts to help some by harming others. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Provident Films, Woodlawn, the true story of a spiritual awakening that saved a high school and shook a city. Woodlawn, in theaters now.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, and we are privileged to have in studio with us today. Of course, we have Kelly Shackelford, but also Paul Diamond. And those of you that have listened to this program know that we have benefited so much from him over the years because as a barrister there in the UK, he warned Kelly years ago, and that's why we started doing some of these interviews. I've seen what has happened in my country, and I want to warn you where your country is going. And whether it's issues related to homosexuality or Islam or others, a lot of these religious liberty cases are very important. And as the lead barrister in so many of those cases, Paul, I appreciate you being with us today. And let's see if we can maybe go through a few of the cases. One of the most recent one is where there was a conflict between a Christian and a homosexual. So tell us a little bit about what you've been dealing with there in the UK.
Yeah, but I just want to make a few points before we start.
Please do.
And that is just, I used to come and meet Kelly, and we used to have all these discussions. You say, well, you need to know where you're going. You need to know where you're going. I've now decided, now I'm in America this time, I'm going to encourage you guys. Because I read so much now about florists, cake bakers, people imprisoned in, Kentucky. I never thought it was possible. And now we're going to have to come to you and tell you to encourage you that you guys have got to stay strong because it's going to be very fierce and it's the beginning. So the case that Kerby was sort of discussing now, that was a very important case we had in England. And what the actual facts of the case were, it was in a school and a homosexual school worker gets talking to a Christian school worker, and I'm going to slightly condense, exaggerate, and short-circuit the whole business, but essentially the nutshell of the case was homosexual says to Christians, it's a very stupid religion, I'm never going to church unless I can walk down the aisle with my lesbian lover, what a ridiculous religion, and blah, blah. Christian replies to homosexual, well, don't worry, Jesus loves you, but it's a sin being a homosexual. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo, go to manager. And this is why the case was rather important. And manager says, viewpoint A, the church is a silly-billy institution that nobody has any respect for, is a totally legitimate political expression of viewpoint. Viewpoint B, that homosexuality is a sin, goes to the core identity of a person's values. You are homophobic, I sack you on the spot. So it comes before a judge in the UK, and we've got this probably similar rules to you, hire and fire, employers run their business, so forth and so on. But the issue why this case was very important is that the judge had to rule on speech codes in the workplace. Now, if the US is similar to the UK, we have ever-expanding equality policies at work that you cannot offend or criticize on grounds of religion, sexual orientation, birth, status. And what's happening in the UK is that the employer is prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner. So the employer said viewpoint A is absolutely fine. I decide that the church is silly. You can express that in the workplace because that's a political viewpoint. Viewpoint B, the religious viewpoint that homosexuality is a sin, is a wicked viewpoint. And so it's discriminatory according to our equality policy, and I sack you on the spot. So the case was free speech at work and the use of these equality policies. And the good news is the Christian won. They held it was an unfair dismissal in the UK.
Wow.
And you can't use speech codes in this sort of arbitrary, discriminatory fashion by employers. So that was one of the, there's a bit of good news in it. So, but I think what I would say is, I put my encouraging hat on, and it's going to sound a bit of a strange encouraging hat. Now that your Supreme Court has ruled on same-sex marriage, it's going to go through every level, as you know now. It's a constitutional right. It's going to be in the schools. It's going to be in the workplace. It's going to be in public funding. It's actually going to be worse than we've got in the UK because we haven't got this concept of a constitutional right. It's created by our parliament, same-sex marriage. And we have a very bizarre situation in Europe where the only organization with any sort of judicial authority over Europe is the European Court of Human Rights.
Right.
And the most bizarre thing in the last few years is that the former KGB agent Vladimir Putin has wrapped himself up in the Orthodox Church and is defender of the Christian faith. And in reality, he's blocked same-sex marriage and a whole raft of other judgments in the European Court. So the bizarre situation is that the Supreme Court is back on track as America leading the world, but this time some people may not think it's in the right direction.
Sure. Kelly, I was just thinking, when we talk about workplace, people will think of the individual who was in Atlanta, the fire chief, Kelvin Cochran, who was fired for writing a book, not even something he said there. Or how about Craig James, who was basically fired from broadcasting, not because of something he said on the air, but because when he ran for Senate, he supported traditional marriage over same-sex marriage. So in some respects, we've got cases that are even more bizarre than what we're dealing with right now in the UK.
Absolutely. I mean, the Eric Walsh case, I can't think of anything
there's another one,
that bad anywhere else where the guy lost his job because the government officials, we have copies of their emails divvying up the sermons from his church, deciding which government official would review which sermon and then firing him because of what was said in his church. So yeah, it's pretty incredible some of the things we're having to fight. But the hope is, the encouragement, as Paul says, is we also have guys like Coach Kennedy. We have people standing up, and the response to that, I think, should be very encouraging to people because, look, Washington is not known for being a conservative state, but yet really that whole place is behind that coach. I mean, we've got atheists writing articles. We've got others saying, you know what, this guy's doing the right thing. He's doing a good thing, and we shouldn't be trying to, restrict his ability to pray and to thank God for his players. And that's exactly those are the kind of coaches we like. As the atheist said, that's the kind of coach I want for my son.
I need some help. I'm a simple Englishman. I thought you had the First Amendment.
Oh, I thought we did too.
Yeah, I mean, you have people exercising free speech in their private life, not even work-related.
Yes.
And they're effectively having, as you Americans would say, the chilling effect of loss of livelihood for exercising their First Amendment. I thought you selected your judges here. I thought they were sort of meant to be robust and defend American freedom. This sounds very un-American to me.
Yes, and this, I love it. They're lawyers for the. What's funny is nobody's ever complained. What happened is a number of the parents evidently went to the superintendent and said, I am so thankful to have a coach like this. And, they mentioned that he prayed after the game. And the next thing you knew, the superintendent was talking to the lawyer, and the lawyer for the school district was opening, quote, an investigation, the end of which they said, well, when he's on the field, he's on duty. And when he's on duty, he's coercing those kids. And so therefore he can't pray. And then they ordered him not to. I mean, it's just wrong. He, as Paul says, as anybody I think understands, as Tinker says, neither teachers nor students leave their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate.
And the courts have to deal with this issue. I mean, in America, because if people are going to get sacked and, discriminated for expressing free speech rights or manifesting their faith in the workplace where other guys can do whatever they want, it will be you'll lose your freedom because we spend our days at work and you got to pay the mortgage.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
a lot of people might, just before I take a break here, Kelly, say, well, didn't we have that Santa Fe case that went to the Supreme Court? And of course that was a little different because they were having prayers over the public address system, but they wanted to have a separation of prayer and prayer, And of course the argument at the time is that, this is not a religious event, but I've suggested you've never been to a Texas high school football game. That's a pretty religious event, but nevertheless, it was different because that was over the loudspeakers. This is an individual coach going to the 50-yard line, originally by himself, only later joined by his students.
Yes.
And if you can't be allowed to go to the 50-yard line after a game and pray, oh boy, that's pretty totalitarian, isn't it?
Yeah. The case you mentioned involved the school writing up a policy which specifically said prayer, and then gave the students the right to pick who is going to do this. Then you have the government essentially organizing a prayer, and that's what the Supreme Court struck down. This is completely different.
Yes.
Again, ask yourself, does anybody think when Coach Kennedy goes out and goes to a knee, does anybody really think that that's the government, that that's the state? He's not there on behalf of the state praying. Everybody knows that. He's there on behalf of himself praying. And, every person who works at a school, whether they're a teacher, or a coach or whoever else, they sort of wear two hats. They wear a I'm the government hat at times, like when they're doing their official duties in school, teaching or something like that. But they also have I'm an individual. So even in the middle of class, if somebody said, "What do you believe?" They have a right to say what they believe.
They do. Yeah.
And if they want to say these aren't necessarily the views of the school district, these are my views. Okay, that's fine. But they have it. They didn't lose all their freedoms when they decided to work, at the school district.
Well, if nothing else, this weekend another assignment: watch Facing the Giants, or of course Woodlawn, and one done by the Kendrick brothers, other one by the Irwin brothers. Two outstanding films that just again illustrate what Joe Kennedy was doing there at the 50-yard line. We have a lot more to talk about, especially with Paul Diamond, but we'll have to take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
This time of year, it seems everyone's looking for a better, more affordable healthcare solution. But with costs rising and options limited, where do you turn? If you're a Christian, you turn to Medishare. It's not insurance. It's over 154,000 believers who share each other's medical bills. It's about half the cost of healthcare insurance programs. And it's fully acceptable under the law. Best of all, Medishare is based on the timeless principles found in God's Word. You never pay for things that go against your beliefs. Medishare is healthcare that fits your family and your faith.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your healthcare. For your free information guide, call 855-87-BIBLE. Not available in Montana. Medishare, affordable biblical healthcare. Call 855-87-BIBLE. That's 855-87-BIBLE.
A big thank you to members of Truth Team 360. You make this program possible. Not a member yet? Join today at pointofview.net. Click on Donate Now and become a monthly partner. Pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We've been talking about religious liberty. A little bit later, we'll get into the Benghazi hearings as well as the race for Speaker of the House and many other issues. But again, we have around the round table Kelly Shackelford, Paul Diamond, and joining us now, Debbie Georgatos. And if nothing else, that's a good reason for you not only to listen to the program, but those of you that would like to, you can go online and also watch the program. And guys, I got to admit, she adds some class here. So, Debbie,
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Paul, let me come to you for just a minute because we've talked about the issue of Christian versus homosexual. But another issue you've talked about with us, and we talk about quite a bit here, is what about this issue of Sharia law? What about situations where Christians and Muslims disagree? There seems to be maybe an opportunity sometimes for Muslims to get the upper hand over Christians, and you've had to defend some of those cases. Can you share some of those with us?
Yes, I can. I think in a wider context, and I hesitate to say this, but we need a wider debate between Judeo-Christian, many decent Islamic have serious issues, as you know, across Europe on freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and even freedom of basic security for people that should dare to sort of criticize Islam in any form. So, including beheadings of soldiers on streets, which is probably our Fort Worth, if I could put it in that sense.
Yes.
Now, I mean, we've done a number of cases on this. Some of the more extreme ones. We've got 17, for example, I believe it's 17 Sharia law areas in the United Kingdom. They're unofficial. They're self-declared areas based on density of population. We've recently now got a bill. The government's going to actually have to act against Sharia courts in the United Kingdom, which have been set up under our arbitration acts, because they're deeply concerned at the sort of measure and nature of the judgments coming out. And so one of the cases I have discussed previously, which I was instructed on, there was an area in the east of London, which is now a heavily Islamic area. There was a church there. That church had been functioning for disco at 3 a.m. in the morning, or you're decided to open your factory at sort of 5 a.m. in the morning in a residential area, you get one of these served on you. Well, the local authorities served a noise abatement notice on this 150-year-old church.
For singing hymns, right?
For singing hymns on a Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. in the morning, because that was annoying people. And as the council official served the notice, they've denied this, but this is what I was told. They said, this is a Muslim area. So having a church, having a service, served a noise abatement notice. And it was a very disturbing case. The church majority Muslim. They ordered it to remain closed. It was a noise nuisance. So, in a sense, English law was used to shut a church.
Wow.
And on appeal, of course, you go out of district. So you go to sort of the Carruthers Smythe English judge who you watch on your TVs suddenly appears to hear the appeal. And in that case, the church was opened after an agreement between the parties. So there are cases of that nature.
Didn't you have one where a Christian gave a Christian book to a Muslim, and that was seen as hate speech or something like that?
Yes, well, that's on at the moment. It's going to be a very big case, and I've got to be slightly circumspect. It's going to be a very big case in the United Kingdom. But it was a health worker gave a book to a Muslim colleague. I think you may know it. I Dared to Call Him Father. You may know that book. She gave the book to him. The Muslim colleague said, "This is what we're instructed." Said, "Thank you very much," took the book and threw it in the bin. For that act, that lady was suspended for 9 months for an inquiry into religious harassment and a couple of other acts which were equally trivial. And it's ongoing in the United Kingdom courts, and of course it's tracking momentum, as they say.
You know, one of the things I want to point out, Kerby, because a lot of the listeners don't know this, but one of the things we talk about here every week is the requirement of courage if you're going to stand for your faith. And I think that's coming to the United States with what we're seeing. I think go to the website and support him by, signing the different things that they can let it be known. But I just want everybody to understand that my friend Paul Diamond is an example of that. He has come under incredible assault at times. In fact, the Queen's lawyer, I think, came after him one time to destroy him. And now they don't know Paul Diamond very well because by the end of it, he had totally turned the noose they had tended lawyer for the Queen, and they were begging mercy at the end because he had them caught in a horrible situation.
I just say I was the first barrister, I think, in 400 years to sue the bar chairman and actually get some money off him, which made a change. But though I did it rather badly, they ended up losing money. But that's another story.
Yes.
But I wanted to say something on a personal level. This is just totally personal, not legal. I did a case where a very foolish street pastor said some adverse words about Muhammad. And
yes,
but I want to say this because it really was probably, I found it my most frightening case, and I think attorneys have got to be aware of this.
Right.
The crowd had attacked Jesus.
Yes.
The police took no action. Then the pastor attacked Buddha, and he was immediately arrested because looks like Islam is a privileged religion. Of course, they're actually terrified of what the consequences would be, but no one ever says that.
Yes.
We had that trial. I want to say it's the most terrifying trial I've ever done. It's a personal story, this. First, we had, the time periods are going on over this, but first we had Paris and Charlie Hebdo, 12 people shot. Then they go to a Jewish delicatessen and shoot the Jews up. Of course, no one wants to mention that. Then, the next month, we had Copenhagen, and then they went to a Jewish synagogue in Copenhagen and tried to shoot that place up. Then our Prime Minister gets very worked up about this, because our Prime Minister does get worked up about things, and starts going, he believes in free speech, he believes in the right to offend, he goes, Je suis Charlie, and flies over there. Meanwhile, while our Prime Minister is making this posturing, including having an argument with the Pope, my case is ticked off by the police. My case is ticked off by the Crown Prosecution Service. My case is then passed through to the Ministry of Justice for this street preacher. And we get a Muslim judge appointed.
Wow.
And not only a Muslim judge appointed to hear trial on Muhammad being insulted, but the president of the Sharia Arbitration Tribunal, which the legislation is going to be dealing with it. And I felt, and people will say I was overreacting, I felt in the whole trial there was a sense of fear and terror, and violence could happen at any moment. And I frankly thought the police wanted it in Britain, because I think you have to be aware of this. What the police don't want to defend your First Amendment liberties. They don't want to defend your freedoms. They want to clamp it all down because it's public order, and that's simple life for them. And, and they're going to clamp it down for your own good. And it was quite a funny email communication, actually, with the pastor, because the pastor, this street preacher, and I think he'd been foolish, but I defend free speech.
Yeah.
He was very scared in this trial. There was this absolute atmosphere of violence. There was insufficient security. We know it's Islam. And he sends an email off to the Metropolitan Commissioner of Police. He tells me this story, so I'm trusting it's accurate. He goes, I'm very scared. I've criticised Muhammad. I'm in a British court. I demand protection. He tells me he got an email back from the deputy assistant. Well, if you've got a credible threat, sir, we'll gladly look into it. And he emails back, it shows the state of the United Kingdom. He goes, I'm sure Fusilier Lee Rigby, that's the man who was beheaded on our streets, if he'd known he was going to be beheaded, would have phoned you up 10 minutes before it was going to happen. And he actually sent that to the Metropolitan Commission. I thought it was quite entertaining, because that's what that trial felt like. They were just not concerned at all about protecting British liberties. And I think the American police will be the same. It's going to be a lot of trouble defending people that exercise free speech if you get a lot of people who get very angry, and you have a series of murders across European capitals.
Yes. Well, I need to take a break, but I want to come back. I want to talk to Debbie Georgatos. Your mouth dropped a few times there.
Several times.
We've heard a few of these stories before, but one of the reasons we're talking with him is years ago, Kelly met you over there. I guess it was in Rome, and we started doing some interviews by phone. We've had you in studio a couple of times, and it just, again, is a preview of coming attractions. You know, Debbie, we talked about Sharia law and whether or not we want to have it in this country. So let's take a break. We'll come back and get into some of that. But if you'd like to join the conversation, we've spent a lot of time on religious liberty, and we'll do that for a little bit longer, but second hour we'll get into a couple of these political issues that are very important as well. 1212. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after these important messages.
The Supreme Court's decision in Obergefell versus Hodges, bringing same-sex marriage to a lifestyle, have mostly been met with success. But there's been some difficulty getting federal laws on the books to force acceptance and affirmation of homosexual behavior. Now, emboldened by the High Court's validation of gay marriage, LGBT advocates are working their plan to quickly get Congress to pass bills that enshrine rights and privileges for open homosexuals and transgenders, often at the expense of the rights of Christians. The sexual revolution that began in the 60s is now culminating in the elevation of sexual liberty over religious liberty, and the left wants it codified. There have been repeated attempts to pass ENDA, a law that would prevent business owners from considering their faith in hiring practices. If ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, were ever to be enacted, employers would find that it's illegal to hold employers with religious and moral objections to homosexual conduct would face a situation where homosexual rights supersede religious rights. ENDA is really affirmative action for homosexuals, lesbians, and transgenders. Over the years, ENDA would pass one chamber of Congress and fall short in the other. Pro-family groups like FRC Action organized campaigns to stop it and thus protect the rights of religious business owners. But there was always a lot of pressure on lawmakers to pass this. I mean, who wants to go on record voting against non-discrimination in the workplace? Last time the Senate passed ENDA, House leaders kept it bottled up so members wouldn't have to vote on an increasingly sensitive subject. ENDA seemed to disappear for a while, but now it's back. That's the term FRC Action uses for it. Its official name is the Equality Act. FRC Action is affiliated with Family Research Council, working specifically on legislation. Their experts have combed through the Equality Act and found that the bill actually strips believing Americans of their rights in 25 areas of the law. They point out that almost every federal law that already protects on the basis of race will be retrofitted to accommodate the radical homosexual rights lobby. LGBT protections will be required in offering credit, housing, public education, including curricula, higher education, including student housing, and in the use of public facilities. President Obama has already put a down payment on the Equality Act. The White House restrooms are no longer designated for men or for women in order to accommodate transgender visitors. The Equality Act also strips those charged with violating it of a powerful tool to defend themselves in court. It limits use of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Believing saint, understand that now sexual liberty trumps religious liberty. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Kelly Shackelford with us, Debbie Georgatos, as well as Paul Diamond. And Debbie, let me come to you for just a minute because, when we talk about this idea of Sharia law, we've watched what has happened in France. We've seen what has happened in the UK. We are concerned that there might eventually be kind of a separate Sharia law court that would be parallel to the American law or what we saw there in English law, British law. But it seems to me that we've had some cases where there's been a real pushback, whether it's the Oklahoma legislature or the Irving City Council. What have you found?
I'm just thrilled that you're covering this topic today, Kerby. It's very, very important. In Texas and actually many states around the country, some conservative activists have pushed a law, which the acronym is ALAC, American Law for American Courts, trying to essentially preempt the kind of things that Paul Diamond was just describing a moment ago, trying to preemptively establish in America, we only have American law. It applies in all courts everywhere, and that Sharia, which is born of Islam, is born of the teachings of Islam, just cannot be the basis of law at all in America. And so one rub, which I thought was interesting that you were mentioning a moment ago, was people say, I mean, if I am a member of my mosque and he's a member of the mosque and we both want to agree that we're going to take our issue to whoever it is we decide, and that is true in a very private way. I mean, people in churches, Christian churches of all kinds will, couples who are arguing or unhappy may go to their priest or pastor and say, we'd like to help us with counseling. But that's a different thing than agreeing to some set of laws applying to you that are respected by the courts. And that's been one distinction in Texas and other places try to say is whatever you privately agree to, once you get to courts is one set of laws. And you will hear, even on the conservative side, but especially with liberals, the argument that it's an exaggerated concern that really, even though America has a growing Muslim population, no reason to be concerned about the rise of respect for and kind of integration of Sharia law into America. And what you're describing, Paul, is America in 10 years. If we don't be firmer, if we don't stand firm with the idea about American law has to apply everywhere and only American law.
Paul, didn't I understand you to say that there's 17, if you will, sort of jurisdictions where Sharia law is at least parallel to English common law?
Well, it's never parallel. I mean, that's just simply based on density of population. The areas are sort of highly full of Muslim individuals, and the council as a Muslim majorities, they can serve notices on individuals to close churches because they politically control the majority on the council.
That's just amazing.
And they self-declare, but it's not recognized, of course, by the government or the British government. I mean, the problem is, as we're talking here, is the freedom of contract. All developed countries have arbitration acts, and we have it. We have, most of our countries have very successful Jewish self-regulations with the Beth Din courts. And we even have the British Federation of Home Removers. If you want your home belongings moved to a new home, you've got to enter into an arbitration agreement with them that it's settled by their little chap that says you get £150 when they break your Ming vase. That's basically British justice if you're listening for the first time.
It's pretty good.
But
we call that binding arbitration is what we call that
Yes.
in the United States.
Yes.
You agree to not go into the courts, but you agree that if in our relationship, in this situation, we're going to go to arbitration, and here are the people who make
and
that
treated
decision.
as final. Binding is
That's
treated
right.
as final. Yep.
Yeah, but
so arbitration courts, and I told you I had the head of the Sharia Arbitration Tribunal hearing my case. It was actually supported by the Lord Chief Justice. It was set up with a grand fanfare. There seems to be the fundamental questions of whether Sharia law is compatible with Judeo-Christian values, or even beheading or chopping people's limbs off, which is in the hoodoo aspects of Sharia law, seem to be totally bypassed by our great leaders. And so these courts are set up, and of course within a few years we don't know what's going on. We hear rumours that criminal laws issues are being determined in them, and it can only deal with civil law issues. The status of women, of course, and all minorities is a big question. Do they get equal hearing, equal rights before these tribunals? And they seem to be, chaired by, from what we can tell in the United Kingdom, uneducated mullahs in little dwelling homes. And so the government is now going to legislate on this, but it's going to be a big problem. And of course, you've now set up a parallel system with parallel societies and people not knowing their rights of access to British or American courts to assert their rights. And so it exacerbates problems.
Yes. Well, and Kelly, one of the reasons we first had Paul on by phone, and now we've had him in studio a couple of times, is he was telling you, I can tell you where this is going. If you want to understand what the future is, and that lesson is number one. Lesson number two, we haven't put on the table. You said something I repeat constantly, and that is you think that this percentage of people, Christians, will support you. But when the pressure comes, probably half as many of those people will really support you. And when we start seeing bakers and photographers and florists and innkeepers and others being persecuted, and when now you have the legalization of same-sex marriage, you're finding a lot of of churches and other Christians are going, I don't have a problem with that. And it makes it a lot more difficult, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely. And that's why, ask yourself the question, okay, you've got Coach Kennedy here who was told, don't go and pray anymore. How many other people would continue to honor what they had promised to the Lord to do and to go and pray? How many people would say, well, that's what I was told, so that's what I'm going to do? Most, I bet.
Yes.
And so this is the problem. When the pressure comes, as Paul saw it happen in the UK, but there's no reason to think the same thing will happen here. And that is, many people, when it costs them something, aren't willing to follow.
Actually, it's a strategic process of the sort of weakening, and it's called the domestication of religion, as you know. But as you say, when the pressure's on, they'll compromise. And people don't want to admit, I'm terribly weak. They're going to say, well, actually, it's not you're homophobic or Islamophobic or whatever you are. It just so happens my views concur with the government's views on this issue. The problem comes, and they knock the numbers down. This is what happened in the UK, and you're suddenly weaker in half. And then they up the pressures, because there will be some people who won't give way. And then you get to the core 15%.
Yes.
America's probably got about a core 30%, because we're a bunch of wimps in Europe. And we're not, and Texas is probably about 80%.
That's right.
You get to a core group who will not move on their faith, whether it's Joe Kennedy or whoever it is, and then the state gets really mean. Then the liberal diversity agenda suddenly stops in its tracks, and the criminal law, full employment sanctions, benefit denial is brought out in full force.
Yeah. Kelly, and I think we're a little closer to that than sometimes we think we are.
Well, certainly. I just look at the last year. I was just speaking at a wonderful church, that I had spoken exactly a year ago, and I said, last year when I came to you, I had in my hand a copy of the subpoena of the pastor's sermons down in Houston, and read it to you, and everybody was, of course, shocked. But since then, we've had a Christian go to jail in the United States, and we've had a number of Christians murdered because they admitted they were Christians on American soil. So it's not something that people can sort of ignore and say that there aren't issues and that things aren't increasing, because they always say, oh, well, even if the persecution you get here, it's not like ISIS. Well, no, it's not like ISIS, but, we don't ever want to be like that situation. So if you don't stand what our forefathers bled for, then, we're not going to have it anymore. And so we've got to have people like Joe Kennedy. And as Paul has said to me before, he said, we look to the United States, because if you guys won't stand and turn this thing around, then what hope is it for us to turn things around? And so we need to help each other by doing the right thing and turning things around.
Please visit the website, pointofview.net. We have some links to Liberty Institute. If you want to send that note to Coach Joe Kennedy, you can do that. If you'd like to read Supreme Irony, that's available there as well. And when we come back, we'll get into a couple of other issues. We did have some Benghazi hearings, and we have somebody running for Speaker of the House. Those are just a few issues we'll talk about in the second hour, right after this.
This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. To make a difference in the world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, and easily contact us with your comments or questions. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the Point of View radio app. And one more thing, if you like it, click that button that says Donate Now and join.
Awakening that saved a high school and shook a city.
I'm asking you right now to stand up and make a decision.
Woodlawn. Experience and Sean Astin, Woodlawn, in theaters now. Rated PG, parental guidance suggested.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, it is our weekend edition. We've had a chance to look at a couple of issues in the past, but we'll get more into those this hour as well, because we have an upcoming vote on Speaker of the House. Of course, we have the Benghazi hearings, but just before we do so, wanted to finish off some of the conversation we had last hour. If you're just joining us, we have Kelly Shackelford with us and Debbie Georgatos, but also Paul Diamond, who is a barrister in England. And for those of you that have listened, you've had a chance to hear him a couple of times. But Debbie, there are some people that say, well, okay, we have the First Amendment. We're supposed to be civil and maybe even tolerant towards people. And it's like, okay, maybe I can't really say something is wrong about Sharia law or some of these ideas. But that's probably a misunderstanding of the
to America, where people understand we have religious freedom.
By pulling down the wage payer. Number 8, you cannot keep out of trouble by spending more than your income. Number 9, you cannot establish security on borrowed money. And number 10, you cannot help men permanently by doing for them what they will not do for themselves. Over the years, these have been incorrectly attributed to Abraham Lincoln. Actually, they were written in 1916 by Reverend William Botker, a Presbyterian clergyman and pamphlet writer. The confusion stemmed from a pamphlet published in 1942 entitled Lincoln on Limitations. The pamphlet had a Lincoln quote on one side and these statements by the pastor on the other side. You know, there is wisdom in these 10 you cannots. Unfortunately, we live in a world today that really believes that we can help one part of society by harming another part of society. We need to listen to this wise pastor before we enact more legislation that attempts to help some by harming others. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Provident Films, Woodlawn, the true story of a spiritual awakening that saved a high school and shook a city. Woodlawn, in theaters now.
Listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Kelly Shackelford, Debbie Georgatos, and Paul Diamond. Let's head out to Texas. Kate, add to the conversation today.
Yes, Kerby. The Marines, I believe it was, because higher up, so that supposedly
Realize that we are actually prosecuting an individual in the military trying to prevent a rape of a young boy. Kind of reminds me of the burning of widows there in India, the Satis and things like that. And the British let that happen.
That's right. You know the quote, don't you?
Yes.
You're giving it to us. Say it to the audience.
Well, again, it says, you have a custom that is to burn widows, but we have a custom too, and that is if you do this, we will hang you and confiscate your property. And anyway, back to the key point here is, Debbie, this is just a good example of the extreme examples of what Sharia law leads to. I mean, people oftentimes say, well, it'll never get that bad. Well, maybe not in this generation, but once you implement all aspects of the Quran in your legal system, we can see the fruits of what a Sharia law looks like in other countries.
It's absolutely true. I was quoting my radio show not too long ago, the distinctions in Saudi Arabia, which has one form of Islamic law, and how their punishments are almost more westernized and more civil among the Islamic countries. It's unbelievably brutal.
Yes.
I mean,
for instance, a woman, you could not leave the house without a male accompanying that's a family member. You could not vote. You could not drive. Now, some do, but I mean, theoretically, you can. Yes.
Yeah.
So your freedoms would diminish dramatically if you lived in under Sharia law, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or Sudan or Yemen.
The way women are treated all by itself ought to cause people who are liberal and care about women's rights to really get on board with banning Sharia law in America. But, even more than just mistreating women, the barbaric nature of punishments imposed contrasted with the Western civilization versus in Saudi Arabia and many Islamic countries are there's too grotesque to explain on the air, but they're very, very violent. We
have the Eighth Amendment, no cruel and unusual punishment, and I think almost all of those punishments would fit into that category. But let me take one more phone call before we get into some other issues, because we had one more on Sharia law, and that is on the Good News Network. We'll go out to Georgia this time. Helen, what would you like to add?
Hey, Kerby. Thank you so much for taking my call. I have never personally felt such a hopelessness in our country, and not that we don't know that God is in control and will get the final word, but everything that you're discussing, the many talking points that you have, there was a woman who prophesied all this that's happening when the Saudis and the Muslims started investing heavily financially in our printing presses, and this was 10 years ago. I can't remember her name, but everything that we're seeing happen is happening because we don't have the godly leadership.
It has pointed out where the money has gone for many of these mosques and some of these various endowments and those kinds of things. So it's a real concern. And Kelly, it's back to one of our comments. We need to have some godly leadership in America right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, and, take the listeners to point of view. I mean, who's you want to say, who's responsible for this, right? And people tend to look and go, especially those who are, no, it's your people, because 1 out of every 2, people that would call themselves born again, Bible believing Christians are registered. And then of the 1 out of 2 of those vote. So if and this is the largest voting block in the country. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, the power is totally within the hands of those who know what is right. And it wouldn't even take a 25% increase.
Nope.
I mean, literally a 5%, and just believing evangelical, or it doesn't matter, whatever, Bible believing Christians that understand and go to church on Sunday, they could change everything.
Sure.
It's so it really is, the responsibility is not the people who don't know the truth, it's the people who do know the truth and are refusing to go and pick representatives that represent that.
You probably saw this in my commentary, but if not, get a pencil or paper. And 13 million, according to 13 million individuals who call themselves born-again Christians who are not even registered to vote. So that's 13 million. Then you have 26 million. So you got 13 and 26. 26 million are registered to vote, but did not vote last election. So that's a total of 39 million in the last presidential election that did not vote. Now, if even a percentage of those, Kelly, voted, you would change virtually every election. And of course, one thing that they're doing is identifying that 26 million and finding how subscribe to World Magazine, or they have given to American Family Association. So we want to identify them, have them pledge that they'll vote. And they've done this before, like in the senatorial election in Alaska, and it made a difference. So again, that's what is going to happen. But again, you have to right now just begin to ask your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, your church members, even your family members, sometimes, because I tell the story about that one individual who lost an election in Ohio by, actually, I guess it was a tie vote, and he found out later that both of his sons didn't vote in the election. So that made Thanksgiving a little difficult. But nevertheless, see, if those individuals are registered to vote and are convinced they could win just if they could get the Christian vote out.
Yeah, and I mean, I think about this practically, everybody who's listening. You probably are in a Sunday school class or a life group or whatever. Instead of waiting for somebody else, why don't you take it upon yourself to go and grab some voter registration cards if you need to from your library or from the post office, and just go there and say, look, I just want to make an announcement before we start tonight. We're supposed to represent Christ in every area of our life. One of the areas that sometimes we fail is in the voting booth. And so I want to make sure we're all registered and that we all vote. And so you might have moved. You might not be sure if you're registered. But let's everybody take a card. It's so easy. And let's make sure that we make a difference for our kids and our grandkids. Everybody could do that in their Sunday school, in their life group or whatever, and it would probably have a huge impact on what happens across the country.
Since you mentioned that, people have been saying, what are you going to do for the election? We'll do the same thing we did 4 years ago, and that is we have a system that we'll put on the Point of View website. There's one which you vote because, some people move or they maybe have let it lapse. Then what we have done is actually have a state map, and you can click on that state, and then we give you every single possible group that we are aware of that we would agree with, and that's American Family Association, and it's a Concerned Women for America, it's Eagle Forum, it's the 40-some-odd family policy groups, Kelly, that you've been then you can really learn quite a bit. And some of those, in Texas and in Ohio in particular, they have ratings of candidates all the way from president all the way down to dog catcher. I mean, it's just amazing. They will rate even some of the judges. Now, the judges may not fill out that, but you learned a long time ago, even if they don't fill it out, then we'll just say, well, this particular group of judges are supported by the ACLU, a National Organization of Women. This particular group is supported by Concerned Women for America. You can kind of figure out where they're going to vote, right?
Exactly. Yeah. There are ways to ask those questions, and the information is there. And it's easy. And one of the great things is we have a one-page document on our website at libertyinstitute.org if they just go under resources. It's churches and elections, what's the law? Because there's a lot of fear about churches. And really, everything that churches want to do or should do is all unquestionably okay. And that is, can they register people to vote? Yes, they can. Can they pass out voters' guides? Yes, they can. Can they, let's say one of their people is running for office. Can they invite all the candidates to that race, or any race for that matter, to come and speak to their church or their group? Sure they can. As long as they invite everybody, if just one shows up, they've done everything they would want to do. Can the pastor speak to the biblical issues of the day that are going to, be a part of politics? Surrounding the country. So all the things that, and we've got this on a one-page sheet to make it easy. The only thing they can't do is something that no church I've ever seen wants to do, and that is to say, our church entity wants to endorse or wants to give money out of our church coffers to candidate A. Nobody wants to do that anyway. So all the things that the church would want to do and should do, and that pastors would want to do and should do, they are free to do.
And again, Liberty Institute, and we have the link to it, and again, it's under resources.
Right.
We've posted it, and of course, every election season we post it again so that you know what your rights are, which are many, and you need to exercise those. We'll come back and talk about this race for the Speaker of the House right after this.
This time of year, it seems everyone's looking for a better, more affordable healthcare solution. But with costs rising and options limited, where do you turn? If you're a Christian, you turn to Medishare. It's not insurance. It's over 154,000 believers who share each other's medical bills. It's about half the cost of healthcare insurance programs. Law. Best of all, Medishare is based on the timeless principles found in God's Word. You never pay for things that go against your beliefs. Medishare is healthcare that fits your family and your faith.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your health care. For your free information guide, call 855-87-BIBLE. Not available. Affordable biblical health care. Call 855-87-BIBLE. That's 855-87-BIBLE.
A big thank you to members of Truth Team 360. You make this program possible. Not a member yet? Join today at pointofview.net. Click on Donate Now. Pointofview.net.
Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Certainly a lot of people around the roundtable today, Kelly Shackelford, Debbie Georgatos, and Paul Diamond. And I thought we might focus a little which legislation goes forward, which does not. Actually is the individual that is sort of the public face of the Republican Party. And right now it looks like Paul Ryan might indeed be the next Speaker of the House. We've posted on our website here something put together by our friends at the Daily Signal, where Paul Ryan stands on 13 key policy issues. He's not an unknown. After all, he ran as vice president last time, so some people do know who he is, and an individual that certainly has had a lot of visibility. But what about this? Because on some issues, I think conservatives have said he's our guy, but on some issues like immigration, everybody said, no mas. So what do we think about this guy?
Well, there's a few things. I mean, if you look at, and why, number one, why should people care? I think one of the biggest things that's often missed by people is they look to his positions on the issues, which is important. But the most important thing about the speaker are the rules.
The rules, yes.
It's if you look at what's been happening, you have this huge frustration in the base of the Republican Party because they won't even take votes on things that they can pass and send them to the president and make him veto them. And we're talking about things like, using taxpayer money for Planned Parenthood and on and on and on, a long list of these things. And so that is one of the main focus. That Freedom Caucus, for instance, that's what they want. They want there to be freedom to offer bills that people will be forced to vote on things and not have it be where what had been happening is everything's decided in the back room by the speaker and a few other people, and then everybody else, the only choice they have is whatever they're doing. So that's the important thing. And so it's a little odd when one of the first things that Paul Ryan said that was a requirement for him to be speaker was to get rid of, the Thomas Jefferson rule that was put in place, almost 200 years ago, that says that you can, call for a vote on the speaker at any time. And so to change the rules in the wrong direction is not what you're looking for. And so I know Louis Gohmert is often on this program, and so I'll read his quotes. I'm reading from a published report here, and he says, and Louis says that he's going to support Daniel Webster,
yes,
who is the person who put his name in the hat right at the beginning.
And when Louis was on a couple of weeks ago, that's exactly what he said on air. Okay.
And he said, I simply cannot vote for a candidate who demands more power before he agrees to be speaker. Now, it's a pretty good point. And then he goes on, and this is his description of Paul Ryan, and I think most people know Paul Ryan is a good guy, and I think they've seen him and his family. But here's some things that Louis Gohmert pointed out, Congressman Gohmert. Chairman Ryan was a leader in pushing the Wall Street bailout, supported Barney Frank's same-sex agenda, voted for legislation that would have allowed the District of Columbia to have a U.S. representative, even though the U.S. Constitution clearly states that representatives shall be from the several states. And he is supported by some of the most liberal Democrats because of his amnesty stance.
Yes.
And he says, though Chairman Ryan is smart, articulate, a great father and husband, our country is in trouble, and sadly, he has been on the wrong side of extremely critical issues and indicates he requires more autonomy than even John Boehner. Pretty powerful argument, and of course makes you wonder a little bit why the Freedom Caucus was willing. What I expected from the Freedom Caucus was they would say, unless you agree to these rules, which allows for more openness, and then we can't support you. And instead, the only rule on the table was from him saying, if I'm going to be speaker, you've got to take away this rule that Thomas Jefferson put in. And now there's rumor now that he is backing off that. Yeah. But that's why you don't have 100% lockdown on this. You've got guys like Louis Gohmert that are very concerned about what he will do. And I think it's like anything else. If you don't get a promise going in, don't expect it. So people need to, this is what we do with all of our candidates. We say, where are you going to stand on this? What are you going to do about this? Because if you don't ask them beforehand, you're not going to get them to do things later.
I agree. I love all that you said. I do think the Speaker of the House has the potential to be a real political messenger, a messenger for the GOP. We've had very few really strong national leader messenger types for the conservative message. And so the potential had to have a great conservative in that spot and really say that the conservative message would be tremendous. And Paul Ryan, I agree, he's a very nice guy. He's apparently a wonderful dad and father. He's a good man. But I think our country is crying out, especially the conservative base, crying out for a leader, someone with strength who will say the hard conservative things. And just, I think it's like Reagan, when he said good, strong conservative things, he drew people to him. That's what I think people want. Of all the positions that Paul Ryan has taken, I think the most troubling in today's political environment is this immigration thing. Just
agree.
not tuned into the frustration the American people feel. And, it's funny, in that Freedom Caucus, I love they got together. I thought originally they said, we are locking arms and we're all going to vote for just one person. And so essentially they were saying, you're going to, the incumbent, the speaker, you're going to have to get us to go along with you. They've apparently a little bit splintered because now some of them are saying they're okay with Paul Ryan and some saying not. And I think there must be tremendous pressure on them. But the last point I was going to make was there was a great article. I think it was in the Hill magazine, and the Independent Women's Forum woman, Heather Higgins, wrote it, essentially saying, why don't conservatives use this as an opportunity to win a point, like saying, we'll vote for you for speaker if you will, for example, remove the congressional exemption in Obamacare so that Congress is covered by Obamacare. Pick an issue and say, we're not just finding a conservative speaker, we're going to pick an issue and make you agree publicly that you're going to stand with that. I thought that was brilliant. We should use it as a time to build strength in the conservative side.
Well, I can see, for instance, look, obviously the conservatives don't control. So not very practical. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that they could get agreement on, like the rules changes, like the majority leader. I mean, the speaker is at the highest level, but there's also the majority leader. Why not put one of the more conservative? I mean, that is compromise. That's right. Working together, not you people stay where you are. And by the way, I want more power. So I think that they've got to be smart about using their authority. And it looks like maybe they've already blown it. I don't know. I hope not. Because and this is the thing, a lot of people don't know about Webster, the other candidate.
Daniel Webster, yeah.
But what he did in Florida was really unusual. It's the only time that I'm aware of anybody who's come in as speaker and devolved power away from themselves. He did that in Florida. He said, I don't like the way this is. It's not allowing the members to speak or to bring their issues out. And he said, I'm going to take this position, and if I get it, I'm going to give away my power. And I'm going to let you do that. And that's what he's promised to do here. So I do think that would be unique, if that were to occur.
And he's still in the race, at least as of yesterday. There was comments online that Daniel Webster is keeping his name in. So maybe he's working people behind the scenes saying, look what different things I could bring to this.
Well, again, if you want to know more about Paul Ryan, we've posted that. By the way, I just might be fair there, say he does have a conservative, and that is the Club for Growth gives him an 83%, not exactly 100%. The one that I thought was most interesting is Heritage Action, which is part of the Heritage Foundation. They gave him a 63%. Really? So you can see that on some of these issues, as Debbie was pointing out, and many others, he isn't as conservative as he might want to be. And certainly some people have been critical of him. We'll come back and talk about Benghazi, but there was somebody the other day that started saying, there are a lot of campaign promises, but Bernie Sanders has gone off the charts here. Have you heard Bernie Sanders? He probably will not be the nominee for the Democratic Party, but Hillary Clinton probably will be the nominee, and she agreed with him on a lot of those. They ran the price tag for Bernie Sanders so far, $18 trillion with a T, $18 trillion. Now, the big spendum items, of course, he wants to go to a single payer plan, and Paul Diamond can speak to that. The British health system, that's been such a wonderful thing, hasn't it? But then some of the others were free college tuition and so $18 trillion.
That's our national debt size.
That is our national debt size. And of course, Bernie Sanders says, well, we'll just tax the rich. And I got a column coming out next week where they looked and said, okay, if you could confiscate the annual income of all the millionaires and billionaires. At first, you look at what people make more than $10 million a year, and then go all the way down to people that make $1 million a day. If you could confiscate it, I'm not talking about taxing. I mean, you could take every dime from Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Larry Ellison and all of that. You don't even come close to a down payment on Bernie Sanders. And so, again, we need a little common sense in this campaign, don't we?
Absolutely. But I do think people need to pray about and watch this speaker race, because it's very important. I mean, it's what's frustrating. And I think the most important thing about Paul Ryan will not be where he believes on the issues, because as a speaker, the most important thing is whether you allow freedom for people to bring issues up, or whether you are very controlling of the situation.
We'll come back and talk a little bit about the Benghazi hearing. Of course, next week is another Republican debate. Thursday, we're going to be covering that. That happens Wednesday night. We'll have more right after this.
The Supreme Court's decision legislative proposals. The left's efforts to mainstream the gay lifestyle have mostly been met with success, but there's been some difficulty getting federal laws on the books to force acceptance and affirmation of homosexual behavior. Now, emboldened by the High Court's validation of gay marriage, LGBT advocates are working their plan to quickly get Congress to pass bills that enshrine rights and privileges for open homosexuals and transgenders, often at the expense of the rights of Christians. The sexual revolution that began in the 60s is now culminating in the elevation of sexual liberty over religious liberty, and the left wants it codified. There have been repeated attempts to pass ENDA, a law that would prevent business owners from considering their faith in hiring practices. If ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, were ever to be enacted, employers would find that it's illegal to hold to the Judeo-Christian sexual ethic in deciding who to hire and promote. Employers with religious and moral objections to homosexual conduct would face a situation where homosexual rights supersede religious rights. ENDA is really affirmative action for homosexuals, lesbians, and transgenders. Over the years, ENDA would pass one chamber of Congress and fall short in the other. Pro-family groups like FRC Action organized campaigns to stop it and thus protect the always a lot of pressure on lawmakers to pass this. I mean, who wants to go on record voting against non-discrimination in the workplace? Last time the Senate passed ENDA, House leaders kept it bottled up so members wouldn't have to vote on an increasingly sensitive subject. ENDA seemed to disappear for a while, but now it's back. That's the term FRC Action uses for it. Its official name is the Equality Act. FRC Action is affiliated with Family Research Council, working specifically on legislation. Their experts have combed through the Equality Act and found that the bill actually strips believing Americans of their rights in 25 areas of the law. They point out that almost every federal law that already protects on the basis of race will be retrofitted to accommodate the radical homosexual rights lobby. LGBT protections will be required in offering credit, housing, public education, including curricula, higher education, including student housing, and in the use of public facilities. President Obama has already put a down payment on the Equality Act. The White House restrooms are no longer designated for men or for women in order to accommodate transgender visitors. The Equality Act also strips those charged with violating it of a powerful tool to defend themselves in court. It limits use of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Believing saint, understand that now sexual liberty trumps religious liberty. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Privileged to have all of our guests in studio with us. We'll just have a few more minutes. Again, Kelly Shackelford, Debbie Georgatos. Paul Diamond's been with us. We've been talking domestic policy, so I haven't had a chance to hear from him too much. But we do have a link to pauldiamond.com, and so I do want you to be able to little bit about what has happened in the UK. It's been a great warning, Kelly, hasn't it, about what could happen here. So I'd encourage people to listen to this again, or maybe send this podcast to somebody else. We made available a CD that you and I interviewed Paul years ago, and still make that available to people, because it's just as a warning about where our country's going if we don't find a way to turn some things around.
Absolutely. I think most people know that things in Europe are, lurching to the left faster than they are in the United States. And we can look at a lot of things that are happening there and go, that's probably coming here. And that's kind of what Paul has been able to do, is say, look, here's what I'm working on. So it's really, it's a privilege, really, that I have a friendship with Paul, that he does the kind of religious liberty work that I do, but over in the UK. And so we can share this information. I hope we don't pass him at some point on the left, fighting these things, but I don't think we will.
I've told you, I've switched. I'm now an encourager. I used to be a warning prophet. Now I'm your psychiatric encourager. You can still win. You just got to go to sort of revolutionary tactics against the British. You won it that way.
Let me real quickly, just before we run out of time, talk about the Benghazi hearings. And Debbie, let me come to you first. Of course, we have posted an article there. We may not get to it today, but also we posted one by Bjorn Lomberg. This child doesn't need a solar panel, but we'll get to that again in terms of climate change. But what about the Benghazi hearings? I'm reading Peggy Noonan, who's going to be on the program with us soon, Kimberly Strassel. We have the one from CNN. What about this testimony that happened yesterday?
Well, for any of you listeners who watched it, it was marathon. I think the total time lapse was 11 hours. And I actually think at the end of it all, I don't know that many hearts or minds were changed. If people really are troubled by what happened in Benghazi, troubled by the private email server, troubled by Mrs. Clinton's being less than forthcoming, then nothing that she said changed that. And the people in her defenders, I think, would look at that testimony and say, okay, she spent 11 hours. They didn't get any admissions out of her. I think that it was a good thing for the country to see that we are still trying to have rule of law. But at the end of the day, she may have committed one or more felonies, but there's not going to be a prosecution of her, because the president, the Democrat Party, controls the Department of Justice and Loretta Lynch. So there's not going to be a prosecution. And so you can just keep parading in front of the public's eyes for longer and longer, what she did wrong, but it's not going to have a consequence. And so I think I'm just always thinking politically and strategically. I think we've pointed out who she is, and any further reiteration of it is just going to turn people into thinking more and more she's a victim. She's a victim of a vast right-wing conspiracy. She did acknowledge that the very night of Benghazi, she emailed her own daughter and told her daughter that this ambassador was killed by an Al-Qaeda-like group. But yet, the next day, she's talking, the video was the whole problem. And she tried to back off from that and say, she tried to fudge in her language and say, I didn't really say that. But it was clear that she knew the night of that it was a terrorist attack. And from several emails she sent, and she did get, she will never admit anything, but she did get caught in essentially trying to pretend it was the video that did that.
Yeah. And, I think what I think about this is it's kind of like, and Paul knows this as a guy who's done plenty of trials and different things. You might be in a deposition. It's kind of almost this is like a discovery, type attempt. And so if you watched all the discovery attempt, you'd go, it's kind of boring, it's kind of long. I don't know that a lot of people are watching this. I don't see it, but I think what's important is what comes out of it. And I do think there are some things that Debbie was just mentioning that come out of it. And so now I think people know that she sent an email to her daughter the night this happening, telling her what really happened. And then she went out into the public, and probably because she was being strong-armed by the president, and told a lie.
Can I ask a question of my ignorance? Presumably, some guy made this video. I seem to remember he was on parole and he went to prison. Again, I thought you guys had a First Amendment, so he obviously suffered a detriment for exercising his First Amendment rights.
I watched the video and it's horrible. But,
maybe horrible.
Production values.
It's now transpiring that the Secretary of State exaggerated an incident which might have impacted on his parole hearing. Isn't there an individual injustice somewhere down the line on this?
There certainly may be. Yeah. I don't hear a lot of sympathy expressed for the guy who made the video. Actually, the parole violation was not. He was.
It wasn't the video,
right? It wasn't the video.
But I think that came out of this. Obviously, if you watched and said, how did she perform? She performed fairly well at times, and then sometimes it was clear she wasn't being truthful, and so that wasn't as good, but not any gotcha big moments. But I do think people now know she told her daughter what really happened. She told, when she talked in Egypt to, I think it was either the ambassador or, I don't know, someone, she told them what really happened. Yeah. She did this 2 or 3 times. They now have the evidence, and this is kind of what a prosecutor does. They collect all the evidence, and then they go, okay, now we see what happened. So I think the American people are going to know that occurred. And I do think that's important, because the most important thing about who you elect is trustworthiness. And that is, if you can't trust them to do what they say they're going to do, then you're not going to vote for them. And so I think this will impact that in some way. That wasn't the purpose. I think Trey Gowdy is an honorable guy, and he's a former prosecutor. He knows how to be fair, and he was trying to be fair to collect all the information. And Hillary Clinton was one piece of that, and they're trying to piece together the whole story of what happened.
The other one I thought was kind of interesting is the representative from Illinois was just saying, we don't seem to have very many of these emails about Benghazi. And she made a comment, that is Hillary Clinton made a comment that I don't think passes the straight face test. And that is, well, I never used email to do State Department business. And it's like, what? On Benghazi. It's like, no, the reason we don't have those emails is because those were absolutely deleted, destroyed, and destructed in terms of the hard drives, the servers, and everything, because I suspect there are probably all sorts of things that would surface. But nobody laughed when she said that. No, I didn't actually use email to conduct State Department business during that time. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hard to believe.
It is hard to believe. It's interesting, the Hillary trust factor, she always polls poorly across the country. When people ask, do you see her as trustworthy? She polls badly. People don't have a sense she's honest and trustworthy. But I was thinking about I was making a list in the car earlier, all of the other, and this isn't the entire list, but with Whitewater, with the White House Travel Office, cattle futures, even her conduct in the, as her term, bimbo eruption squad, she never really has been forced to come clean with anything ever in her whole adult life. And this will be another episode. People will speak of it and say she did bad things. Others will say, no, she was never prosecuted. She was never convicted. She's done nothing wrong. They have managed to skate above the law, which isn't supposed to happen in America.
She's Bill Clinton without the giftedness in covering up his untruths. So it's interesting. She's got a lot of him, but not the gifted politician covered up side.
Well, again, if you would like to read a little bit more about some of this, we have some articles on the Benghazi hearing. Of course, if you want to know who the Speaker of the House is, Paul Ryan, who probably will be the presumptive nominee and speaker, that is there. And then I did mention this one. We'll get to it next week. But Bjorn Lomborg, what a great asset he's been over the years. He wrote the Skeptical Environmentalist. And this one, this child doesn't need a solar panel. We're going to be talking a lot more about climate change over the next couple of weeks, I suspect, as well. Paul Diamond, thank you so very much. I know you have to fly back over across the Atlantic, and it's just been a delight to have you in the studio with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Should be an American airline, though.
Yes, well, if nothing else, visit the website.
Better than BA.
It's pauldiamond.com, of course, libertyinstitute.org, and of course, ladiescanwetalk.org. And you'll be on Sunday, so people can even listen to it, even if they do not have your radio station hearing it in their area. So certainly that's an opportunity as well. I want to thank everybody who's been involved in this process, and that would be Andrew and Catherine, Chris, Shamila, and many other individuals behind the scenes. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
Modern life is go, 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 and Point of View is absolutely ready to go with you. I dare say that most of us have access to either a smartphone or a tablet, maybe even a computer that is app-based. There's a new way to keep up with Kerby and the team, the free Point of View radio app. With quick links to listen to the program live, to keep up and share Kerby's meaty and insightful viewpoints, commentaries, read articles on issues we're talking about that impact you and your family. Did you know you can also watch the show? Yes, radio with cameras. You can access that through the app as well. There's a link to our action alerts, how to find us on the radio across the nation, ways to contact us, and so much more. Visit your app store, iTunes or Google Play. Search for the Point of View radio app. there's no reason not to take us with you. The free Point of View radio app, available now for Apple and Android devices. And when you get it loaded, there's one more button I'd like you to press, the one that says Donate Now. Join Truth Team 360. Support us financially as we support you with the truth that you need. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.